Hi everyone, I'm Ms. Elander, and today we're going to talk about stories as cultural artifacts. As we get into starting thinking about stories as a work of culture, we need to think about first, how do you define culture? Well, it turns out defining culture is a difficult thing, and even anthropologists have different views of what culture is. As we did in class and trying to define our own culture, we realized that there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of systems at play that influence what we believe and what we value in our world. That being said, trying to pin down one specific American culture is very difficult, but there are two schools of thoughts into moving into defining culture. The first is that culture is a complex whole that includes the things we create, like the knowledge, beliefs, art, morals, laws, customs, and other capabilities and habits man has as society. Um, the things we produce, pretty much. On the second school of thought, it's all of those things, but the patterns we have, the explicit and implicit things that define our behavior. Things like the symbols we create, the distinctive achievements we have, the artifacts we create, the ideas we developed, and also the things that we want for the future. So, cultural systems are also related to what we want to produce, what causes of action we want in our future, and what we want to see change. So when we're thinking about culture, we can kind of think about it in these two terms, that it's both explicit and implicit, things told to us and things that are unacknowledged that run deeper in the core, but also are the things we produce and create as members of our society. When we're looking at ways to try to really get to the core of what culture is, there are several models that help us to do so. One model is the Trompenaars layers model of culture. And basically, these concentric circles are working from the obvious, explicitly said decisions and relics of our culture to the deeply more founded assumptions that we come by implicitly by interacting in our worlds and in our cultures. So let's think about this in terms of American culture. That outside layer is the explicit systems of our culture, the artifacts and products we create. In our American culture, the most easy way to see these artifacts and systems is going to be through the media we produce, through the legal systems we have, through the government agencies we have, and our economic system. It's not just going to be a product of like what we consume on a daily basis, but also like what are we leaving as a record for what we have. Looking at court cases is a great thing to think about the explicit systems of our culture because it shows not only in the personal movings of people do our practices change, but also show over time and in our legal system how these beliefs have changed. When we get into the middle, we get to be in the more hard to pin down areas of our cultures, those norms and values. The things about social rules of conduct is that we understand them implicitly because we are a part of them, and when asked about them, we could define them. But these values and aspirations are not always told to us and recorded in a way that could be researched. When I think about our American society, we could think about things like going to college. All of y'all are in a college class right now, thinking about how the aspiration to go to college and the value in education, we could articulate that. College is valuable, being educated is valuable, but we may not be able to come to the basic assumption, which is at the core inside layer, core belief in the culture is why. For Americans, we believe this American dream that's part of our culture in a deep down level, and education is a part of that. For me to live in a meritocracy and to have this value of hard work and dedication can get me what I want and what I put into the world is what I will receive from that. All of these other things come from it. And that core assumption and belief we can come back to is usually not as explicit or easy to notice as we think. Those implicit beliefs are so ingrained that we may never realize that my drive and aspirations to work hard and make a lot of money and make a better version of myself to support my dreams come back to this idea that my hard work and dedication can get me what I need. Similar to this model is Hofstede's onion. which is also concentric circles, but it is nailed down to more specific things. So thinking about the symbols of our society, things we value or our heroes, and the kind of rituals and practices we have, all come back to what we value. So looking at these actions and these tangible things to get to those more deeper core rooted ideas. A little bit different way to approach culture is to think of it as an iceberg model. And as we're starting to discuss culture, we often see this coming up. People say, it's everywhere. These ideas are everywhere. Well, if you're not able to identify them, that could be dangerous. Where are these beliefs coming from? And most of that is because it's under the 90% of things we don't see. When we think about culture, the what of what we see is normally recorded as like the behaviors or those artifacts, things that can be observed and are told or taught explicitly. But in reality, the reason we have a lot of these movements in culture comes down to things that we don't articulate, things that are implicit and happen subconsciously in our culture, that you wouldn't have documents or laws or things to explain. They're not tangible. So what do those actually look like? So we're thinking about the top layer of our culture, these surface things. We think about those media artifacts, our music, performance, dance, art, culture, or crafts, literature, games. We think about religion, festival, holidays, flags, language, food, obvious documentable items. But when you get to the deeper part of culture, we notice things like how we communicate with each other, facial expressions, gestures, eye contact, body language, conversation pattern. We get into our approaches to religion, marriage, values in raising children, attitudes towards elders and adolescents, ideas about sin and death and cooperation versus competition. What is beautiful? What is courteous? How do we value age, sex, class, family, fairness, and justice? All of these things are a lot more complicated and complex, and they don't have explicit written documents to support them. When we're thinking about why does this matter and why do we care so much about how culture reflects stories and language, we want to think that language, stories, and culture are so closely connected and are a great way for us to be aware of what we are being taught in our culture. Because if we're not paying attention to the stories and the language we are receiving, we are unaware of what is going on in the bottom half of this iceberg. When we think about language and culture, language mirrors our culture and is integral because the way we talk and the way we express ourselves is a complete reflection of our individuality and the way we perceive the world. Therefore, stories and fiction allow us to critique, to assert, to question, or to celebrate aspects of our culture. And by tuning in and listening to what stories, whether that's fiction as we're reading, the music we listen to, the films we watch, the TV shows we engage with, what they are saying about our culture, whether it's positive, affirming it, or negative and trying to subvert it, allows us a window into what is influencing us and allowing us to be agents in choosing how we are influenced and what we are influenced by.